Right, I guess I can get started. Hello, welcome. Thank you for attending my talk. My name's Julien. I am German and I live in the UK, in London. I work for a company called Oleo, which makes hiring software for large clients such as the UK government. I am going to talk today about turning humans into developers in a post-COVID world, which is about training junior developers. It's about remote working and hybrid working, and it's not about technology as such. So we're not going to see code. We're not going to see any Perl. But what I do is I train Perl developers from scratch. So we're going to see how that goes. Please do hold questions till the end. We're going to have hopefully a little bit of time for a Q&A sort of discussion, ideally session. But it depends a little bit on how much I'm going to waffle. So first of all, quick show of hands. Who of you is a developer? That is all of the hands, I think. Yes, it was all of the hands. Great. And who of you has trained as a developer? Specifically, as in, okay, I see 1 hand, 2 hands, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I mean is you've done specifically classes, courses, university, something with the goal to become a developer. Okay, that's most of you. Great. All right, cool. So what I have done after I've attempted university and failed is an apprenticeship in Germany. So that typically lasts for 3 years. You find the company, so you apply for jobs and then you get hired and you go to work. And at the same time you go to school, usually like 2 days a week or for two weeks, every 6 weeks. And you don't really need prior technical knowledge. You just sort of like they hire you, show up, you start, and it takes 3 years and then you're done. And which technology you do really depends on what the company does. So I just sort of ended up in a Perl company. I remember the guy who interviewed me told me, so it says you know a little bit of PHP on your CV. So we don't do PHP. We do Perl. That's not because we think PHP is shit or anything. It's just Perl was around when we started. That was sort of my first impression with Perl. And so I got that's how I got here. In the UK, where I work now, I use the apprenticeship model, so the stuff that the government mandates in Germany for what you have to learn, as the basis for how I run my team and how I develop people. And we're going to look at that a little bit. I've looked at the US and how it works here. So apparently there is now also an apprenticeship system, which I think is fairly new, but like the most common path to become a developer is going to university. Or apparently also self-study is what I've learned from talking to people. But there are also apprenticeships. However, it's not very strictly mandated. So companies can decide how long it's going to take or how much they're going to be paid. I had a quick search and I found 1-year apprenticeships requiring coding knowledge. Like you have to pass a coding test for $60,000 to $80,000 a year, which is like 3 times as much as you would earn in the UK. Interesting. Well, so this is the system that we're based on. But let's first try and answer this question. Should you train developers? I don't know. It depends. I can tell you why that might make sense. So why would you train? Okay, so maybe you can't find developers. There are lots of reasons why we can't find developers, especially Perl developers. There's usually a very small, I might call it a dwindling hiring pool. People don't want to change languages because experienced people, they're not very likely to pick up a technology that they're familiar, that they've heard of and think is on the way out. Because why should they? Because they know Ruby, they know Node, they know Java. There are lots of jobs for that. So why should they learn Perl? Or maybe there's an unappealing location. This is a little bit pre-COVID, but it might be. So my company is in South London in Wimbledon, where next week the tennis is going to start. Super exciting. You can actually walk to the tennis from our office. However, in London, you would want to work in the center because then it takes you only an hour to go there from wherever you are. I know an hour commute is not very long for you, but if you have to sit on a subway, on a tube, then it's quite long. But if you're on one side of that, then for some people it's really fast. For everyone else, it's going to take 2 hours to go to work. Europeans don't like that. So that is really bad. That's why people wouldn't come and work for us. So you can make your own developers. Because lots of people want to be developers. There are a lot of them. And young people today, and so we've heard this briefly from Ovid this morning, young people today don't have an opinion on Perl. it used to be 10 years ago, I would interview people and they would ask me, why would you use Perl? And they would be putting value into that statement. They would think, that sucks, I don't want to learn that. Whereas now people ask, and why are you using Perl? Like, what made you decide to use this technology? Because they've never heard of it. And then the answer is, well, when we started, it was around. And when you've written that much code in it, and it's such a big project and product, you can't change it because that's not economically viable. And then they go, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of that. And that's really cool. But also, people can't be picky because when they're straight out of uni and they need a job, they need a job. So they're going to take the job they're offered. So they're not going to be super picky about it. And then you can use that to build loyalty. But we're going to talk about that. So what level should we hire? Well, I hire people straight out of school, straight out of university with ideally a STEM degree. So math, software development, anything that's kind of like sciencey. But I've also had someone who had a degree in English literature, and she decided she doesn't want to be a teacher anymore. So she self-studied, and then she was better than all of the master's degree students that we interviewed with tech degrees. And so we hired her. That was great. So it really depends kind of on how good someone is. Bootcamp graduates is something that you're going to be seeing a lot. Bootcamps are paid classes, usually for 3 months, where people go full-time course, they pay for it. Do you know how much they cost here? In the UK, they're usually around 10 to 15,000 pounds, which is like $20,000 or something. It's quite expensive. So you pay for it, and then you've basically done a code along class for 3 months with people who equally had no idea. And I don't rate it very highly. But you will see a lot more of these days. And some of them are good, but most of them, I feel, are a little bit entitled because they've paid so much money. They expect that they should now be owed a job. But it's really tricky because there's so many of them. So you might also get junior devs that already have some experience, like 1 or 2 years of experience. But the problem with them is they've already been exposed to a different language, and it's very likely that language has a better job market. So I've learned Node. Why should I now? I've got 2 years of experience with Node. Why should I switch to Perl? I can't answer that. I have no compelling argument. So they are a bit tricky, but career changers are good because career changers might have done a bootcamp. Career changers might have done a lot of coding. They might be age-wise anywhere from about the same age as graduates to older than me. I've had lots of applicants who are older than me. And they can be really good, but they can also not be. So it depends. But I think you shouldn't just look at people fresh out of uni. Everyone has the ability to learn to code, I think, and everyone can be good at it. And often you can find really good people by looking at the people that are usually overlooked. So, okay, now we know why and who we might want to hire. So let's look at preparations. There's a lot of stuff you have to do. So first of all, you should have a clear interview process. And I have to apologize a little bit. The company I work for, we make software that models hiring processes. So I'm going to use some HR speak, so because that's the field I work in. So yeah, you want a clear interview process. So that means what questions are you going to ask? And you make sure you ask the same questions for everyone. How much time do you want to spend on the interviews? How much time do you want to spend on the whole process of how long it's going to take you to hire people? What are minimum requirements? And that also means you have to have an exact specification of your role. Like, this is what they're going to do. This is what we expect them to already know. This is what we expect them to be able to achieve. You should have work contracts set out before you start. This should all be clear before you start even hiring. And so you need to talk to HR about this. We're going to look at that in a minute. And you should have a budget. You should know how much they're going to earn and how much you're going to grow them, and so on. Did you want to ask a question? Can we do questions at the end, please?
For me, an interview is more conversation. It sounds like what you, okay.
I'm going to come, sorry. So questions at the end, please. We're going to come there.
Okay.
Right, so you need a budget for the salary, but also for the hiring costs. You need skills because that makes it easier to reject people who only partly fit. And the most important question you need to answer before you even start is, do we have to fill this role now? If we can't find someone we really, really like, we're going to hire the next best one, or are we just going to wait and try again later? That's super important. So once you've done all of these things, you then go and talk to people in the company and you set expectations. So 3 groups: the team that they are going to be working with, your management, and your stakeholders, who are the ones who tell you what should go in your product. So for your team, everyone should come with an open mind. They should bring patience, and they should all have the willingness to explain, or they should at least be open to trying this if they haven't previously. The company I work for now, they didn't have most of this when I joined, but I got hired specifically to do this because they didn't have anyone who wanted to do it. So once they saw it works, they've all changed, and they're now all super happy to support my people, which is great. But at the start, no one wanted to do it. And then in management, you need someone, someone needs to train them. So your management needs to be aware of the fact that the person who's going to spend time with your junior people is going to write less code. Because that's what it is. Like, you're managing people now. There's a lot of time spent explaining, so you're going to have less actual direct output. However, there's going to be a return of investment if you take that time, because you're going to have more developers afterwards, and then they're going to produce more stuff, and possibly different stuff that you previously couldn't ship. And that's where the stakeholders come in, because first of all, of course, you're going to spend more time on doing more discussions. You're going to do more requirements engineering because you have people who have fewer skills in these things. So it's going to take longer. Okay, that's fine. Stakeholders typically love this because junior people are going to work on less hard things, and less hard things are often the ones that the senior developers don't have time for. So most of your companies are going to have this problem that a lot of feature requests go to die a slow death in the basement of the backlog. Your junior developers can do those features. Easy wins. You know, the things that no one otherwise would do, but that actually make your life easier and make the life of your stakeholders easier. So that's great. Usually stakeholders buy-in is very quick. They love trainees. However, you do have to get buy-in from everyone. So now you've done that, let's look at hiring. How does that work? So first of all, you need to source candidates. There's my HR lingo. Well, how do you find them? Well, for example, your company website, you might have your own job board. You might have LinkedIn and Indeed, and you don't even really need to post to these platforms because those big ones, they just scrape your stuff anyway. They find it, and then you're going to be flooded with applications because lots of people want to get into tech. So the last time I've been hiring, so we've hired a new one at the beginning of May. I've had that role live for 4 days because we got nearly 200 applications in 4 days, and I had to turn it off because I do actually want to read all of them, and there's only so much reading I can do. And we had to find one out of those 200, and that took quite a long time. So you have to be aware that because everyone wants to work in tech, you're going to spend some time, and you should spend that time because it will pay off. Once you've done that, we're going to come to interviewing. So my process actually has 3 rounds of interviews. The first one is a phone call with, or nowadays it's a video call with the recruiter of HR, well, the in-house recruiter, who asks them phone screeny stuff. So like, confirm your CV, ask them about their life so far, and like what their decision making and general articulateness. Can they actually talk to people? That's quite important, as opposed to general belief. And they probably, like, your organization probably already has this process. Everything after that, you should lobby for doing what you want to do. So in my case, there is a classic 1-hour interview, which used to be in person, now it's remote, where I might get people from my team to get involved. I might have someone from HR involved. I asked very generic technical questions. So they're not language specific. They're things such as, can you explain for object-oriented programming what's an object and what's a class? A lot of people with a fresh master's degree can't, which is very sad. I also show them a screen share, a little Excel table that looks like a badly normalized database. So like with Spotify, there's like some songs, there's like a list of songs, comma separated, like 1, Yellow Submarine, 2, whatever. And then it says the Beatles, and then it has it says like the Beatles - Yellow Submarine, and a couple more. And what I found is people don't know who the Beatles and the Rolling Stones are these days. They don't realize those are artists. And so that breaks the test. So you have to use, I don't know, Taylor Swift or something. I don't know. But yeah, really, really generic. And I also make them give a presentation up front, because at least in in-person interviews, do a presentation about whatever you want. You have 10 minutes, do whatever you want. It can be your hobby, it can be your uni project, it can be your dog's sporting club, I don't care. As long as you talk about something that you know a lot about and I know very little about. So I want to see you talk about something that you're excited about, because that way you're not going to be nervous afterwards, because you've done the hard bit. So that's the classic interview. Once they've passed that, I'm going to do a technical challenge, and that is not a homework challenge. We're not doing like, here's a coding test, go away, do it. No. I used to invite them into the office for trial day. The whole day, come in, you get lunch, we give you a computer, you get a set of tasks, and you're just working in the office for a whole day. Because for most of them, they've never worked, full stop. They've just never worked in a job. So they have no idea what it's like to be a software developer. How are they going to know? So I get them in and I get them to do this. And that way they can decide, do they like what they're doing? Because they might be really good at it, but they might think it's really bad. Like, I don't enjoy this. Then I'd rather they find this out before we hire them and we invest into them, and then they quit. And this is really useful. Nowadays, I do this as like a 2 to 3 hour pair programming call, where I've got a GitLab repository pre-set up with tickets, and it has a code base. I export it and re-import it, and that way everyone gets the same. They give me a user, I add them, and then we can screen share, and that works really well. This is Perl. They usually have no Perl experience, but it's simple enough that it doesn't matter, and I can work with them and mentor them through it, and we can see, can we build rapport, that kind of thing. So they need to feel like this is work, and they need to feel like I want to do this. And if they don't, great. In that case, we can eliminate them, and we're not wasting anyone's time. Once we've done that, so we've picked one, now we have to onboard them. So remotely, that's a bit harder than when they come into the office, of course, but it's the new normal. So you have to make sure that everyone feels really connected, that, you know, you join a new company, there's a chat, there's lots of chats, but chat's hard, especially if you're like 20. I'm going to have some slides about how things are hard nowadays, and what young people find hard in the working life. So give them lots of support, make sure that they feel like they're part of a team, that people talk to them, maybe run a daily stand-up, that kind of thing. Make sure that they know they are being looked after. Great, so we've onboarded someone. Now, how do we mentor them? So can you think back to the very first day on your first tech job ever? Just take a moment, think about that, yeah? Were you looking forward to going back on the next day? Anyone had bad experiences and didn't really want to go back? No one? Okay, that's good. I like that. Oops. So my story here is, I went the wrong way. I'm sorry. My story here is that I went to uni and I really hated it, and I felt like I do not achieve anything, and then I dropped out. So I found this apprenticeship, and on my very first day, a colleague came in and said, like, after I'd set up my computer, so here is a competitor website. We need you to parse the prices and like make a function to take this HTML and turn this into a data structure. So I'd written the I'd read the learning Perl book. I was kind of like, okay, I had a general idea what to do. So I wrote some regex to parse the HTML, as you do on your first day in a new job when you know nothing. And it worked. And this was all CGI, like a long time ago. So the guy took it and was like, okay, this works. And then it went into production and it worked. And I suspect it's still running. If that competitor still lives, I don't know. But it was like, it went live the day I wrote it. And suddenly I'd achieved something. Whereas for like a year and a half in uni, I was just like, this sucks. I'm not getting anywhere. Suddenly I'd done something. And that was amazing. That was such a good feeling. So I really wanted to go back. And then 2 months later, my school started, and the guy who sat next to me asked me, so what do you do at work? You know, my company, they allow me to write websites sometimes. So I'm like, I'm building, you know, projects with external, you know, like I think I'd done something for UPS or something, for shipping, like ordering parcels or whatever. So I'd done like large stuff in 2 months, and he was allowed to write websites. So you onboard people well and it works. And then they want to stay and they want to do great things. But now we've got hybrid working. So lots of companies don't go to the office anymore, and your hiring pool therefore is much bigger, which is nice because remote means you can get more people in. You're not limited anymore to the one place where your company is. As young people, they might relocate, but they might not. Who knows? Now you can hire them from maybe in your country or in your state or I guess if you're the US, then it's the whole of the US, at least. Maybe it's Canada as well. I'm not sure. In most of Europe, you could probably hire people from all over Europe or over the EU, not the UK anymore. Oops. But in our case, we can now hire people from all over the UK, whereas before we were like bound to London. We would just not regard people who weren't in London because they usually wouldn't want to move. So that's a good thing. But for career starters, it's not that easy. And we're going to explore how so in the next few slides. So first of all, I'd like to talk about mentoring. Now, this isn't just about work, but it's about all of the things that come with mentoring. And I think most of you have had mentors, and most of you will have had people that mentees, people that they have mentored, whether it was conscious or not. But let's look at all of your roles as a mentor. So you're a teacher, you're a manager, you're a boss, you're a role model. You are usually a motivator. Sometimes you have to be a parent if you have young people, even if they're not your children, they kind of are. So you do have to assume that role occasionally. And I think it's also really important to be their friend. I don't like to be the boss, but I sometimes have to be. But I still think all of those roles are kind of like the different hats I have to wear while I am in that position of mentoring them. So how do I do that from home? Well, first of all, you have to be available. So you have to talk to people really regularly. You have to chat. You have meetings with them. You make sure that if they have questions, you make the time. You send them a video link and you encourage them to ask questions. You tell them you can always message me. I used to say, I'm sitting over there. I have my headphones on. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean I don't want you to talk to me. It doesn't mean don't interrupt me. It just means I'm listening to music because the office is loud. If you want something from me, come and hit me on the shoulder, throw something at me. I don't care, but get my attention. I will talk to you. The headphones are not to keep you out. I can't do that anymore because they can't see me because I'm at home in my living room on my computer and they're somewhere else, probably in their bedroom on their computer. We'll talk about that problem later. So they have to know that they can message you. They have to know that you're available and they have to know that everyone is available. And that's so important. And then you have to help them to help themselves. So they won't always message you, but they're like, this is hard. I'm going to interrupt you, whatever. So, I occasionally send messages like, how's it going, to, make sure that they know I'm there. But I also teach them how to solve problems. Like, I don't give them solutions. I help them find solutions and I help them to know how to debug stuff, to know how to ask Google questions, stuff like that. So when they ask me stuff, I might say, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out together. I'll show you how to find out. And that's really powerful because career starters often assume if they have someone much more experienced in front of them is that you're like this inapproachable God almost who knows everything. And it's so intimidating, but I'm not, I don't want to be intimidating. I'm not very good at this. I might be all right at teaching people stuff, but I'm like, okay at tech. I'm very good at problem solving and I'm very good at finding solutions, but I'm not good at knowing solutions at all. So I can go and teach them how to find the solution. So that's really important. Then you've got to be patient, of course, because young people, inexperienced people, they don't know very much and they go through these phases of not knowing anything to knowing something and thinking they know everything. And then it's kind of this like the graph about their knowledge and their confidence goes sort of like lots of little knowledge, no confidence, a little bit more knowledge and lots of confidence. And then it goes down and it's like stairs, but with a little dip. So every time they learn something new, their confidence goes through the roof and then it dips again when they encounter a new problem. So you need to be really patient with that. Don't take shortcuts. Always explain stuff. And if you have to explain it twice, then find different words and explain it twice or 3 times or whatever. Or if you can't make them understand it, get someone else to explain it to them who has different words. If you run out of them, that's okay. But if you don't do that, they're not going to learn and then they're not going to be great. So that's kind of a little bit on you. Gift and advice that goes further than just work as well. So I think being interested in the person is important. So, I can share anecdotes about stuff, about like what I've experienced in my work previously. I do go on explaining sprees occasionally where like particular tech, we talk about something and then I might go off and explain how HTTP works. Because in the school system that I've come from, we had to learn that. I had these printed out HTTP headers and printed out TCP and IP headers and we had to fill in these tables and stuff. So I kind of sort of know all of this a little bit still, but they're not going to learn it. It's kind of a little useful. Like you don't need to have it, but having heard of it is more useful than never having heard of it. And it's not the stuff that they would like teach themselves when they self-study. So if you can pull that out of the head occasionally, that's really cool. Because that way they also see, okay, this guy has lots of broad knowledge. I can ask them about lots of stuff. But yeah, that's the mentoring. Now about the training. So again, we can do this from home. You don't want to just help. You have to have a plan. Let's have a look at how this plan works and how you can execute this plan, but also how you can be connected. So connected first. My company didn't have daily stand-ups before because we were all just sort of in the same office. We were all working on different parts of the product, so we didn't need it. Once COVID hit, it was like, right, at least for my team, daily stand-up, because everyone's just sitting in their bedrooms. Everyone's a bit scared. So I scheduled a 10-minute call every morning. And then occasionally, at some point, we got our ticket system to provide us something resembling a board. And we still use that. So that's all right. So now they talk to each other every morning. They kind of like not just report, but they talk about what they've worked on. I mean, we all know how daily stand-up works, which means that they can help each other. Someone goes like, okay, so I'm working on this and I'm stuck. Then someone else goes, oh, I've had the same problem. Here, let's like get together after the meeting and I'll show you. And that's really cool. So this goes so far that the people who've kind of like finished my training program, but are still working with us, which of course is the aim, that people like stay long term because we're trying to build a bigger team. They still attend this, and they've even had some senior people who've like onboarded during COVID, want to attend it, and they're still there. And that's really cool because having someone senior as a role model there is very, very, very useful. So that's quite good. Then we have code reviews as part of the development process. They have like every pull request needs to be reviewed. I hope that's the norm for most of us. But it doesn't have to be senior people doing it. You know, it can be junior people. The only rule we really have is that people in my team cannot review contributions from someone else in my team. So they can't do each other's code. But the people who've graduated out, their code can be reviewed by the juniors. And the other senior people's code can be reviewed by the juniors, which they do. And we also do like mob code reviews where we find something larger and then we do it together. And I may ask one of them to drive or I might drive and we just go through it with screen sharing. So that's quite good. My rule about this is if I've helped them work on a ticket, I don't review that code. And if I have someone who has just started, I will always review everything they do, but I won't be the code review. I look at it first, I give them feedback, so that's less embarrassing if it goes really wrong, because that matters to them, I think. And lastly, we have pair programming. So this is probably the most useful, powerful tool. It is much easier to point out things like a missing semicolon when you can look at their screen, right? Like, so I used to just wander around in the office occasionally. I'd get up to get a new cup of tea. And I just like stand behind someone and peer at their screen. They might not even notice me. And I would see, okay, it's not working, tests are forever. Just go like, there's a semicolon missing. And then I'd wander off again and they'd be like, oh, thanks. So I can't do that now because we're all at home. So I schedule meetings. We've got, in my case, I've got 2 1-hour meetings, sessions with each one of them every week. So they all got their slots and that's their time that they can use whichever way they want. So some people just want to work on their ticket together. Some people say like they bring a set of questions that they have, or they bring the stuff they've done and they just go, okay, this is, you know, these are the questions I have. Can you look at this? Is this fine? And then they're like, okay, half an hour later, I'm done. We can have a chat, or I want to go back and do something else. Or they might message me and say, actually, today I'm doing this really boring thing. You know, you can use this time for something else if you want. And other people, I just jump on the call and we just both do our thing. And they're screen sharing, but we just both do our thing and we just chat. Then occasionally, if they have a question, I'm there, but we might not use it. But this way we can stay connected and I have a chance to actually see how they're progressing. Otherwise, I just can't, because I can't like watch them. The way I do this is typically with VS Code. We do screen sharing with VS Code. We sometimes use the live share plugin, which basically turns a whole VS Code project into like a Google Doc with multiple people working on it. That works quite well. That way I can select things rather than say on that line number. Though I've found myself not doing that as much anymore because I tend to not need it, because usually talking about line numbers is enough. And yeah, screen sharing is kind of the most important thing. You want to see browser, you want to see terminal. If you're web-based, you want to see browser, you want to see the output they're getting, test output, stuff like that. And then you can point out things as well. You can point out they're selecting and clicking. Instead, you can teach them keyboard shortcuts, for example, because otherwise you wouldn't see that they're not using them. But yeah, apart from doing these pair programming sessions together, you can also encourage them to pair up between themselves. So like for the week that I'm away now, I've basically said, you two, can you do those together? Like use those slots to help each other. And I think that's working well. My computer broke, so I can't check, but I'm hoping it's working. I have to probably WhatsApp one of them. So yeah, the only downside of this is that people don't notice that they haven't shared their screens. That's quite funny. They'll be talking to me for 5 minutes, and I go up. You haven't shared. I can't see you. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but you get over this. Important though is don't overdo it. So you have to leave time for breaks. You have to schedule focus time for yourself, and you have to remember to eat, especially if you work from home. I think some of us are prone to forgetting that occasionally. So don't schedule calls back to back. Leave a bathroom break, and don't force people to turn their video on. Like no one wants that. You don't need it. You don't have to see them. Like they're there. They're talking to you. It doesn't matter what they're wearing. It doesn't matter where they are. As long as they do work, that's fine. Because that's intimidating, and you don't have to. I don't care if they've gotten dressed today. As long as they're, happy and doing their work, I'm good with that. Great. So leading from home. When you lead, the best way is leading by doing. So that's still true for remote. I would like to look at how to do that. The first part of that is motivation. So make them feel like their work matters, because motivation is the most important thing. And it's hard to see that people are not motivated if you can't see them. So if they work fully remote, it's very hard to see that someone isn't having fun, because it's easy to hide, or, you might just not pick up on it. Apart from that, keep in mind that people like being seen. And I don't mean with the camera on. I mean, they want to be appreciated and they want to feel like their work matters. So you have to keep them engaged, and you have to tell them that they're doing a good job. You have to tell them that the stuff that they're doing is useful, which depending on your product might be easy or it might be not so easy. In our case, we don't really talk to our clients. We make the SaaS product, we ship stuff, and then we have a whole team of implementation people who click in the product to build things. And it takes weeks for stuff to get shipped. And then it takes longer for it to be configured so it can be used. So we very rarely get feedback. So I try to kind of be an ambassador for what my team have done and how much time that saved, for example, our internal people by making processes in the product easier. And that's great, because that way they get recognition. And then people who work customer facing will actually message them and say, hey, I've just been using this thing that you built. It's great. And that feels really good. So that way you can keep them motivated. And you also have to listen to their problems. So I asked them things like, do you like the ticket you're working on? Do you want to work on something else? Is this boring? Is this are you hating it? If you spend a week on this, you haven't made much progress. Is that because it's boring? And I like to keep an open mind about that. And I like to give them stuff that they want to work on. And I think that's why it's important to build a personal relationship as well, because then it becomes much more comfortable for them to answer questions like this. Unnecessarily don't even need to have those questions. You can just, they will just tell you. And that is really good. But you can also try and learn about what's going on in their lives. Do they have partners? Where have they gone on holiday? What movies have they watched? Stuff like that, because that way you can emphasize with them much more. And then you need to keep track. So how do you do that? Well, the calendar, of course, is your friend. Always plan your meetings, plan them well in advance, give them plenty of time to prepare, invite them way early, especially if it's things like where you talk about progress, because it's scary if that just pops up and it's the next day, or even more scary if it's like, my office now. That's always bad. You don't want to set expectations like that. When you talk to them, take notes and refer to those notes again. It's fine if you have your private notes that say things that they've told you. That's okay. I keep those notes. I also do weekly catch-up meetings with them. So like a 10-minute, 15-minute chat with each of them every week, just to know what's going on in their lives. That's usually not about work. We talk about, video games, or they ask me if it's the Monday morning when I will say, I hurt. And then whoever is in that call will be like, did you go climbing again? Yeah, I overdid it. And then I also went and played my silly phone game where I walked 30 kilometers. So I hurt all over, and then we're laughing together. And they'll ask where I've gone, and it's great. And they think it's important to be their friend. So that's where that comes in. And then we do monthly progression meetings. So those are kind of like what you would call a one-on-one, or maybe a performance review. Just there's a progression framework, which we look at every month. And we're going to talk about this now in the next section. So developing, you have to give them a clear outlook, a path where they're going. And goal setting in the traditional management way doesn't always work in software development, because what's the goal? Like, you ship tickets. I can't say you have to ship that many tickets. You have to write that many lines of code. That's just not going to work. So we're going to look at alternatives. Let's try to do that with questions that they might have. So what is expected of me? How do I know if I'm doing a good job? How am I doing at the stuff? Do I need to do anything else to get better? How long is this training program? When do I get to work on harder stuff? Why should I even stay here? All of those questions. There's all stuff people ask themselves all the time, especially when they're new on the job. And then there's also challenges, such as, of course, the beginning of a new career is really scary. We've all been there at one point. But I think it's easy to forget how scary it was. So it's really not clear what's expected of you in the beginning. And you can't really compare or measure how people learn. That's a big problem. So everyone learns differently. And that's true for all of us. So you can't measure them and can't compare them to themselves. You need to keep track of your team, but that's hard. But you want to find a way how to do that. And I'm going to show you a way. So your team is only usually, at least that was the case for me, the team was used to having really experienced people. So juniors seem like a bad idea. They're going to waste our time. They're not really producing very much. So I'm going to look at answers to all of this. The answer, in my opinion, is a career progression framework, which is a structural document to help employees understand the expectations of their roles better. It clearly defines skills, roles, what's needed to advance, and how that is measured. It doesn't provide a rating system. It doesn't provide a hard list of requirements. It is certainly not checkboxes. Lots of companies do that. At the time where I wrote mine, I took a lot of ideas from Monzo, that's an online bank, but lots of companies like Google and Meta, they all have this. They often have this for their entire business, including, HR and other non-tech roles. So it's really, really useful. And I'm sure some of you have encountered it. In my case, there are 5 core characteristics: mastery, impact, influence, communication, and leadership. They're all sort of like slightly different things. And then we categorize stuff into them. So I have levels of progression where in each level there are different targets or goals or behaviors inside of these 5 characteristics. So you'll notice my graph grows downwards here. That's because it's really hard not to learn and to get better. It's like you have to be really, really bad if you're not learning anything at all over time. So the graph goes down because gravity. And then you get better. So I start out with a probation period. I don't actually know if you have this in the US, because I think at will employment is a thing here, right? In most of Europe, well, in all of Europe, once you're employed, you can't just be fired. You usually have like 1 month or 3 months of notice period, where either you or the employer can give notice, and then you work the notice. And that's usually in the UK, it's a month. In Germany, it's 3 months. Unless you agree something else, can be longer. So the probation period is at the beginning of that, where you have a slightly shorter notice period, but you still can't say out the door. No, that doesn't work. So once they've done that, they are a trainee software developer for a rather long time. And there aren't really dates on this, or like years, because it might take a year, it might take 2 years. It depends, because everyone's different. And then after that, they will be called a junior developer, and then they're leaving the team, but they're staying on, and they're probably still a junior developer. So this is kind of the same as with the apprenticeship in Germany, where this would be 3 years. So it really depends on like individual people in my case. And as they go about this, stuff gets harder and harder. In the probation period, This is in our case, is the first few months at Olio. You're settling in, you're doing really basic, you're learning how to code Perl, maybe learning how to code JavaScript, depending on what, are you more front end, more back end. You're learning how to use your development environment. You may be doing some tutorials, you may be doing some tickets, very simple tickets. It's all very, very low key, but there is impact. But you work really closely with the mentor. You're doing kind of step-by-step instructions, that kind of thing. It's very basic. And then they become a trainee developer, which is the longest stage in the progression framework. Complexity and size of the tickets increases over time. So as we go, it gets more and more complicated. So in the beginning, it might be a ticket that says, do this, blah, blah, blah. And then you might want to use these files and you might want to look at this previous ticket. And then later on, at some point, it'll be, as a user, I want to do this thing. Good luck. So, but it goes gradually. So this way, we're building confidence in their technical skills and in their communication skills. We're working really closely with the mentor for both planning as well as implementation, and also for having questions. So the more experience they gain, the fewer questions they have to ask, and then the more questions they ask before they start, whereas in the beginning, they ask more questions while they're working. So that's quite interesting to see. And once they've done that, they will be a junior developer where they're much more self-reliant. They take more ownership of their code and of their tickets. They think about the big picture more. They trust their tech skills more. They make decisions better and they trust in their decision making. Communicate both with technical and non-technical people. That's a really big one. If you work in a company that makes an actual product where you have stakeholders, you want them to be able to talk to those people, not just to tech people. They will need less help and they will know when to ask for support and when not to ask for support immediately. And they'll be able to help other people, like the more junior people. And once they've done that, they're ready to leave the team. At which point they will be integrated into the day-to-day operations. They will work independently and everyone in the team trusts them. So that's a big one. You build this trust over time and then they don't report to you anymore. Yay. So once we've done all of this, it's great. Let's look at common remote first challenges. So I found all of these over time because we've done this for a while now. So you've got personal ones like that career starters, they don't have a good home office space, which I said about the bedroom. If you have to sit in the room that you sleep in, and in the UK, those are tiny shoe boxes, it's not great. You don't have a proper desk. In the beginning of COVID, it was really sad to see people sit on their beds in video calls. It's that is not very healthy for your mental health. It's not great. So that's a problem. You can't solve it, but of course, you can be aware of it and you can try and be supportive with it. And that includes things like home situations where at certain points it's loud, so you don't schedule calls with them when there's stuff going on with small children in the house, for example. Working from home is lonely and disconnected. If people live in a shared house, again, a very common thing in the UK, young people, they rent a room in a house. They might not even know the other people who live there in the beginning. So it's lonely, it's disconnected. Talk to them a lot. So I think being encouraged to make, the problem is that they need to be encouraged to make friends at work. I'm not used to this. They're all strangers. It's all just chat. It's really tricky. So you have to kind of try and help them do that. And we've got communication challenges. So people often are afraid to ask questions. I've already mentioned this. They just don't want to. You have to talk to them about this. They think that chatting to people interrupts their work. I mean, it's much more disruptive to go over to their desk, isn't it? But for some reason, people of this current young generation don't seem to understand that. While they're all messaging on Discord all of the time at work, they're no, I can't message this person. I've never met them. It's really strange. I don't know a solution for this, but it's really strange. Big chat rooms, the big general tech chat, questions get lost. People don't answer them. So it's better to message people directly, where you have to tell them which ones to message to. And it takes a while to learn. Often don't know who can help them, and you can be supportive with that. Then we have skill challenges, you can't watch other people work. That's a big one that my team often raised, the ones who had been in the office previously and now they're not. So what can you do about that? Well, you can try and schedule sessions where people show stuff, for example. You can hear what other people are talking about, especially work problems. If you're a big open plan office, you know a lot of stuff. You feel included. If your company culture is such that, someone discusses a problem, it's fine to pitch in if you know anything about it, that's gone. You don't have that anymore. Everything happens in private chats. It's gone. It sucks. So, like, there has to be ways of solving that. I haven't found a very good one yet. And also the professionalism, like the water cooler chat goes away. Professionalism in general goes away. Like how to write an email. People don't know this. How to talk to people who don't work here, customers, externals. People don't know. It's weird. You have to teach them. As I said, you're a teacher as well. So in conclusion, I think in-house training is a viable solution to address hiring pipeline problems if you follow those steps, careful plan and prepare the hiring process and the onboarding process, structure your career progression upfront, communicate effectively, keep people motivated, and address challenges of remote working by making the most of your tools. Great. Thank you very much. Do you have questions? Or comments? Yeah.
I have a question about interviewing. It sounded like when you were talking about which interview questions to ask, it sounded like you have a set of 8 questions that you ask everyone, and that's the end of it. Whereas to me, an interview is more of a, you might have some questions you want to start with, but then you want to see where the conversation takes you.
Nice. So the comment here was my slides about interviews sounded like I have a set of questions that I always ask, but your experience of interviews is more you start with those questions and you see where you're going to. Yes and no. So you're probably used to interviewing experienced people or interviewing where you're the interviewee and you're an experienced person. So my own experience of interviews has always been we have a chat and then you get a job. I've done way more interviews from the other side of the table than where I've tried to get a job. And I think it used to be, at least in Perl, it used to be like, hi, I do Perl. Okay, cool. Welcome. At least that's my experience. So if you have junior people who haven't really done much working, they don't know what to expect from an interview process. They don't know what an interview might feel like. Sometimes they're really nervous. I find the best way to compare them is you ask them all the same questions. And the way my questions are laid out is really about not do they know the answer. I don't care if they know the answer. They're all really open questions. And what I care about is if they don't know the answer, can I help them to get the answer? Because that's going to be the job for the first year or two. And if I can't build that rapport, then they're not the right person. So there is a lot of discussion. They're not multiple choice, or they're not like, what is this? What is that? They're not at all. They're really like, here's a situation. Talk to me about this situation. And if you can't, let's work it out together.
Yeah. So I guess that answers my question, because I've never interviewed a really junior, somebody with no experience at all. I always dealt with somebody who's always had at least 5 or 10 years of experience.
Yeah. So, he's saying that's he's not really done that same situation. Yeah, I know. It took me a while to get to that point as well. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Does anyone do something like this at work? Yeah, 1, 2. Do you want to? Well, Lee as well, like a couple. Does anyone want to share how like what they're doing is different to what I'm doing? I'd love to hear it.
Really different. I mean, I basically share a lot of the sentiments that you shared. We've done a fair amount of hiring from boot camps. And I mean, you're right, you get, it's not the highest quality education, but I think you made the point about finding people that are doing career changes. A lot of those people are going through boot camps, and you can often find somebody with really valuable secondary skill set.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether it's like customer service or, something that brings in, if you combine somebody who's really good at developing with somebody who has a skill or intuition in some marketing or customer service or sales or something, it's a really cool, really valuable combination.
Absolutely. I'm just going to sum this up. So the person in the audience has said that for their own experience, they do go through like with a lot of bootcamp people. And if that's career changes, they will often bring valuable non-tech skills like customer service or other things or management or something like that, that otherwise people who are fresh wouldn't have. And I fully agree. We've also found that hiring internally to take someone from the customer facing side, who in our case would have 2 or 3 years of experience using our product, they are going to be so much stronger at understanding our product than someone hired externally, even if the external person is a really good developer or has really good aptitude for software development already, not skills, but aptitude. It's going to be really hard for them to learn our products. I sent them on the same class that internal classes that people we hire to do the configuration of our product go through. And it's like, I think 15 hours video classes and like tests and stuff, because this thing is so complicated. We just had this talk about the roguelike game next door. So our state machine builder in our product, the first time I was doing this class myself, was like, right, you could build like D&D solo adventure books in this without writing code. And that was pretty cool. So it's very complex. So I fully agree. The more external knowledge they have, the better. Great. I think now I've run out of time. So if you want to talk about this more, please find me in the hallway. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.